Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Chit Chat. I've got Ged McNamee with me. Ged, how are you doing? It's been a while since we've caught up.
Yeah, it is. I mean, obviously, I see you post on LinkedIn, and obviously we've had a bit chat through the LinkedIn, but yeah, in the flesh, we haven't seen each other for quite a while.
Yeah, I think you were head of the academy then the last time that I saw you at the Academy of Light.
That's correct.
So you got a bit of a change in role now, head of recruitment?
Yeah, I came back about 18 months ago as head of recruitment on the academy side. So less responsibility in some respects, but greater in others, in the sense of obviously trying to find talent to bring into the academy.
So if I just delete this part of the video, Ged, and as a Sunderland fan, not as a professional who works in the industry, so is Lionel Messi and Ronaldo coming next year? Is that who you've got in?
Yeah, we can just about afford their wages,
Well, I was going to say it's an interesting one because new owner, and it looks like Sunderland, the foundation of light and the stadium of light might be getting finally a little bit of light again.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it needs to, like you've alluded to there. The facilities around the club, the hotel on the roundabout, the beacon of light. The foundation that's associated with the club. They have a fantastic reputation, and the whole infrastructure, the academy, it is a Premier League infrastructure, and obviously the fan base is unbelievable, and they deserve to be, the fans deserve the club to be back in the Premier League.
Yeah, no, I agree. You're right. I just did some staff training this week with the guys over at the Beacon of Light as well, which was quite good fun to do. So tell me a little bit about this new role. We'll start off with the recruitment job, and then I'd like to talk to you about the academies and how that's changed over the years as well. So the priority is obviously bringing in younger base talent from within the region, or?
Yeah, I mean, mainly, where we are as a club at the moment, it's predominantly with bringing in talent within the region. From probably the ages of sort of 7 right the way up to the U23s. And in the past, we've gone into Europe. We were prominent in Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, but due to circumstances, financial circumstances, we've moved away from that market slightly. So the emphasis is on the region, and it is very competitive because obviously, we've got Newcastle up the road and Middlesbrough down the road, so it is a competitive market,
Yeah, and I suppose we were talking about it earlier, Ged, regarding COVID and how difficult this year's been. How difficult has that been for you to get to see games and bring players in?
Well, I mean, it's been very difficult. The games start, then they stop. The local FAs have sort of introduced COVID regulations as well, which, in some respects, it stops the local scouts going in to watch the grassroots football. So a lot of it's just sort of like players you've identified, trying to keep in touch with them, and ensuring them that when we get through this period, that we're still interested and would still like them to come and visit the club. We're in a situation where we have the majority of our scouts are are furloughed, and probably Newcastle and Middlesbrough are the same. So at this moment in time, we're probably in the same boat, and we're not really competing because there's nothing to compete for presently, really.
Yeah, I think if we look at that on the other side, Jed, it must be really tough for some of these kids who, maybe they had a good season last year, or they're looking to go to the next age group and they were expecting maybe a call from Sunderland, Newcastle, or Middlesbrough, and all of a sudden that's not coming at this moment. So that must be pretty tough in terms of their mindset.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of stuff going online. I know ourselves as a club, we're delivering stuff online to to our academy boys every week, most days, various members of staff, whether it be sports science or the coaching, or just basically touching base with them and trying to get some group chats with them. And I would imagine other clubs are doing the same, because really it's the only forum you can use presently, really.
Yeah, and I suppose that's the one good thing at the moment, is that everybody is in the same boat. Nobody's getting too much of an advantage at this stage.
Not really. No, there's not, and obviously all clubs are governed by Premier League rules or AFL rules, and you can't break those rules, and it's just a little bit unfortunate for, say, like boys that clubs have made commitments to from like 14-year-old to say, look, you're going to get a scholarship. You can't get access to those players in the flesh, really, and it's just basically from under 16s and upwards that can come in and do some training, but like even that's restricted, and you've got to have social distance in mind. You've got to have ventilation, and even before you start thinking about things now, it's sort of like, well, let's think of the COVID aspects, and that's what's being expected of clubs to do,
Yeah, it seems that a lot of clubs have done such a good job, though. Football does, in some situations, gets a really bad reputation for some things, but I think they've adopted really well in terms of the changes and tried to do as much as they possibly can, maybe so better than a lot of other sports.
Well, I can only speak for Sunderland, but like from the academy perspective, they've done a great job, really. I mean, obviously, prior to the COVID, the under 18s were coming in, and like after training, obviously you've been to the academy, they can go to the refectory and obviously they're having a meal, but then like that's been stopped. So like we had to think of another way, and we have like mobile heaters, and the food's cooked and they're put in. I can only describe it as sort of like plane delivery, when you're on a plane, when you get your meal on the plane. The boys collect that, they leave, and they're eating it in the car, or they drive home and eat it at home, and then they bring the containers back. They're disinfected, washed, and then obviously the food's delivered in that manner. So at least, we're still providing food for them after training, So I think in lots of respects, it's sort of like thinking outside the box. And I think there's got to be a greater emphasis on the boys taking control, really, and looking at what they can do. It can't be, solely like what the football staff are doing. They've got to take ownership in regards to what they're doing, or when they're not at the academy. I mean, we have an online yoga class for the boys to jump on. That's running on a weekly basis. So, it's like, yeah, we're trying to do our best, but then equally, the lads have got to take ownership, and responsibility and respect of what they're doing. If certain things aren't being delivered to them, can they deliver it themselves,
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And I guess one of the other things with that is the staff as well. How are the staff managing? And, the sports science staff, it's probably not ideal for a kid to be eating a meal in a car on the way home. It's probably not very good from a physical point of view to relax and get those muscles cool down and stretch a little bit when you sat in the car trying to eat your food. But I think it's just the adaptation of the world. We just all have to adapt slightly differently. And I was listening to Djokovic, I think it was yesterday or the day before, and obviously my background's tennis, Jed, and he was talking about the players are literally thinking about quitting tennis this season if they have to isolate from tournament to tournament.
Yeah, I mean, I always look on that as like a tennis player. I think it's even harder than a football player, because you're in isolation, you're by yourself. I know you like in tennis, like football, they have coaching teams around them. But like, the main thing and the main changes is that you can't be in the collective. So like, the lads who are coming into Sunderland, they arrive, they have to stay in the car, then they meet, and then, they come ready. come, with the kit on, and then basically, they're into the warm up. So I'd suggested to maybe one or two of the lads. I've spoken to one or two of the lads who maybe's had certainly a few muscle problems. Is like, you've got to try to maybe get here a little bit earlier, and like not in the collective, but find a space like by yourself to go and warm up yourself, or do a pre-warm up, do a lot of stretching, get yourself ready, instead of like going directly into the warm up. And I think it's hard for them, but like, I mean, I was reading some stuff like what you've alluded to about the Open in Melbourne, and like the amount of time that the tennis players had to arrive, and the fact that they were stuck in the hotels. And it's like it that then I would be like thinking about like the mental aspects must be really kicking in then, and the fact that they have to be mentally strong to get through that, really.
Yeah, and you can't prepare for something like this, Jed. So you can't prepare mentally to sit in a hotel room for maybe 14 hours a day by yourself. That's something that we've never had to do that. So why would we ever train for that? With other things, we're able to train for them, and that they're built into tournament schedules, match schedules, training schedules. But something like this, where like what they've done in Australia, where they had to isolate for such a long period of time, and then they've been in the hotel rooms for such a long period of time, it's not going to maximize their performance, but also it does play with you a little bit mentally.
Yeah, it's got to, really. And I suppose it's that mental aspect of staying motivated, in the sense of like, you're in your hotel room and you're thinking, right, I've got to get up, I've got to do some stretches, I've got to do, you are then really going to need the social media or a Zoom call where somebody's like, you're doing it together. And, it is looking at different ways of doing it. I mean, even like outside of sport, like my wife's found it difficult because she swims every day. She's not allowed, she can't do that. She goes to a gym in Newcastle 3 days a week, and like she can't do that. So, she's exercising on her own in the room, but like she's on social media, she's exercising with a girl online.
Yeah.
And that's helped her get through it, really. But like, at some point you're still like having to push yourself to do that, because like, lots of sports, are done in isolation, but there's a community feeling to a lot of sports as well, where you've got people around you encouraging you or helping you, or you play a team sport, and that's a lot of people play team sport for the social aspect.
Yeah.
So from a mental thing, it does put pressure on about being mentally strong, really, and sort of being positive, in the sense that this is gonna come to an end at some point.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how many players are still at the top of their game, when we come out of this, hopefully very soon. And hopefully we might get some good news from the Prime Minister shortly as well. But when we eventually come out, it'd be interesting to see how many players who were maybe on your radar, who you thought, yeah, you're there or thereabouts, or you're just about to step up to that next level. But then because they've had almost 12 months out for some people, whether they've actually maybe able to have grown physically, mentally, whether they've been able to stay in the game, or technically whether they've sharpened their skill set as well.
It will be interesting. And I mean, like, you do offer, we as a club, we are offering things for our academy boys online, but it's some of them are very good. The majority of them are very good, but there's lads who are not really buying into it. And it's like, coaches of sport have mentioned it to me, and I've sort of said, yeah, but like, they might find it difficult in using that medium. They might really be missing the social side, the bonding side of like walking in and seeing all the peers around them and training with them. So everybody's different. So I don't think, I just said, well, ultimately that's his decision. Maybe he's using it to take the pressure off. Maybe it's the fact that he's not coming in training every week is a chance for him just to reevaluate and maybe take some pressure off, because we also forget that these are young lads and they know that they're in an academy situation, and that, they're always being judged from a distance or close up, and that we forget that must bring pressure, and obviously we're going into the back end of the season. You try to hide it, you try to dress it up differently, but ultimately they know that there's a decision coming whether they're going to be retained or released. So in some respects, it's a massive commitment for parents and kids, and maybe some of them are just taking it as a means to sort of like just step away from it and maybe do something else, which in my opinion, like I don't think is a bad thing sometimes, really.
Yeah, I think it has been a good opportunity to reflect, maybe reevaluate what you want out of life. And these are young kids, so maybe they're spending some time developing other skills, other interests, other hobbies. And they might be more motivated when they come back, because if they've missed it and they love it and it is their passion, you could be more motivated when you return, and they could be even better players than what you expected.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'm not one for sort of specialisation in a younger age. I was always, as an academy manager, keen to let the lads do other sports, experience other sports. And, you would find that, like what we did find, that a lot of the lads that were in the academy, when we did a little bit of research, was the fact that, yeah, they were good footballers, but they were good sportsmen, basically. And they did a lot of other sports for the school. So it was like, I was never keen on saying to them, we don't want you to do that anymore, I was always keen to let them, go and play tennis or play rugby or whatever, or cricket or whatever sport it was, because I always felt that long term it would assist the football side, really.
So if I move from Recruitment Ged to your old job, how long did you have that job for, by the way, as academy manager?
Well, I've been associate with Sunderland for about 25 years, and I think I was academy manager for about 12 years. So obviously seen a lot of changes over the years, really.
I bet you've also seen some great players come through as well. I mean, I can remember Andy Grant, who's now at the Foundation of Light. I think Andy's the foundation manager now. He brought Lyndon Gooch over from California when Lyndon was maybe about 11. Short kid with really long blonde hair.
Yeah, I mean, Lyndon, he always used to come over basically with his dad, who's from London, to go and visit his nan in London. And obviously I think Andy had been out in California coaching and come back and mentioned him. And I think we just sort of said, look, like on his way after being to London, why doesn't he, like, it was always a holiday time, why doesn't he come in and do a bit of training, like, And it sort of like went from there, really, and we built up the relationship. And the fact that he had dual citizenship, he had a UK passport as well as a USA passport, we could register him. And obviously he was a talent, and that's what we did, really.
So who would you say is the best player that's come out of the academy system when you were there? Because there's a few, isn't there? When you look at Jordan Pickford, you look at, I guess even Duncan Watmore. You also look at Jordan Henderson. There's been some really good players.
They've all had good qualities, and everybody talks about Jordan, and Jordan was a model academy player, very, very good player. From a very young age, but in fairness to him, when he started to go through puberty and start, he had a lot of growth problems, and he went from probably being the best player to just like, yeah, he's okay, he's not bad. And then, I mean, the story's been told a lot about the fact that when we had to think about him coming in as a scholar, there was a lot of question marks because he wasn't affecting the game. We weren't sure where he was going to play. His body was all over the shop, and he was probably the last one we brought in on the scholarship program. But again, I've spoke about it before. The medical department, the sports science department had input on that, and probably I leaned on them to sort of say, you know, is his body going to settle down? Is he going to develop? Is he going to grow? And they were all adamant that that's what was going to happen. So obviously we give him the green light really, and brought him in as a scholar, and then basically he just went from strength to strength from there. So, you know, that, but there's been a lot of good lads, and like I sometimes sit and I think about lads who were in the system but then didn't take the path where that Jordan did. You know, that they left us like John Egan was a boy that we brought from Cork, from Ireland, and he was a great character, good lad. He'd had a sporting background. His dad was a famous Gaelic footballer in Ireland, but then, you know, John had to deal with adversity really. You know, he went out on loan and then he broke his leg while he was out on loan, and never played for like nearly 13 months. So that was tough for him, but he came through it. And then, you know, there was different arguments about, you know, we wanted to keep him as an academy. We wanted him to have another contract. The senior people didn't think he was up to the standard, so he ends up leaving the club. But then his pathway is like, he goes to Gillingham, he does well, he goes to Brentford, and he still ends up playing in the Premier League, you know. So they all were different characters, they all had different strengths and weaknesses. But, you know, ultimately, I think one of the things within the academy is not like, it's dealing with adversity, you know. How do you come out the other end when things aren't going as well as they should be, really? And I think the players who've gone through the system and are playing at a high level, or the highest level possible, I suppose, with Jordan Henderson and Jordan Pickford, they've all had periods when it's not working, you know, and the digging in, or they're not happy, or they're getting kicked up the backside. And my day as academy manager, off myself, or certainly off Kevin Ball, but like they dug in and they took on information, and at times the parents were like contacting us, and, you know, we were always of the mind of like, look, we're there to support them, but we're not going to keep patting them on the back all the time. You know, they need to kick up the backside sometimes, and they need to find their route to you know, come again. And a lot of them did that. And you know, we, you know, when I talked to Kevin, I think we put that down to like, it was a tough environment, and it was deliberately tough, because Kevin would tell you that, you know, football's a tough environment. People look at it and think, oh, it must be great, you know, to be a top class footballer. But if you analyse it and strip it back, probably the top players have like worked very, very hard to get to that level, really. And I know certainly Jordan Henderson has. And you know, I just was talking last week to someone about Jordan Pickford. You know, people not know that Jordan, when on afternoons, would be out by himself on a plateau, on a training pitch by himself, dragging goals about, practicing his kicking, which he's noted for. But he you know, he was doing that. And, you know, I think my time as academy manager, and maybe he's coming back in, I think, in all honesty, some of the lads lack that, really. You know, the think, it's just going to happen. But in essence, really, you've got to make it happen. And I've drawn that from like a lot of sports, really. I mean, you touched on Djokovic just before there. I was reading a couple of weeks back, Federer, you know, and how when he was number one, he trained even harder to stay as number one. And I remember reading an article about mentioning Nadal, who'd identified a weakness in his game, and he was like thanking Nadal for identifying that weakness, because that allowed him to go away at probably the age of 31 and work on that weakness. And like, you know, at the age of 31, he's a top class player, but he still wants to improve as an individual, to stay at the top. Was just sort of like, wow, you know, young players of any sport need to read that and digest it really, because he's an absolute legend, but it just doesn't happen. It's a lot of hard work, and I think whether it's the academy system, parents being overprotective or what, but it is well, yourself, professional sport is brutal, and you've got to sacrifice and work hard to stay at the top, basically.
Yeah, Jed, it's really tough, and you mentioned Kevin Ball there, and Kevin's always been a bit of a hard taskmaster, and I actually did a little interview with Kieran Brady on the Chit Chat, and Kevin Ball was there when I was at Sunderland under Dennis Smith, and I remember just how strong a personality and character he was then, and I don't think football's changed much in terms of how hard it is and how hard you've got to work. But I think society's changed a little bit, and people are slightly different now. And maybe what you said there is we have to look after them a little bit more. They're a little bit more vulnerable. They don't necessarily understand how that you have to work hard. You might need that kick up the backside a little bit from time to time. And when you mentioned somebody like Roger Federer, who at 31 has won everything. He's number one in the world. He's won every Grand Slam. He's an immense tennis player, and he still wants to get better. That's significantly different to somebody who's playing maybe third division, fourth division football player at 18 and 19 who thinks they've already made it and have decided not to work harder. And I love that story about Jordan Pickford, because what he's done by himself on top of everything else, it's the extra stuff that takes you to the next level, I think.
Yeah, I would agree, and I mean, a couple of weeks ago I was saying that a lot of coaches can say, oh well, I work with that player, I work with that player, and I had an influence on that player. But in essence, you quality sports people in all sports, I think it's them that really make themselves what they are. Really, I look on myself as a coach to sort of be a sounding board, really, or give a little bit of advice. Whether they take it or not is their decision. But really, the drive has got to come from the individual, and you can't, as a coach, want them to be good. You do, but it's got to come from them. They've got to have that inner drive, and I think when you, like I've alluded to, when you strip people back, like Jordan Pickford and Jordan Henderson and all the lads that have pushed on and playing at the highest level, they had a drive, they had a desire to get there, and they maybe took risks sometimes. I mean, like Conor Hourihane, like who I really loved him as a footballer. He was left-footed, and like I thought he had qualities. I mean, Kevin, we're talking about Kevin. Kevin was tough on him, big style. But like, Conor was at Sunderland Football Club when we were a Premier League, and like took the decision not to accept the contract. And he ended up going to Ipswich with Roy Keane, and then he drifted off to Plymouth. But then he reappears and he starts, he breaks in to senior football, and then, again, he went a different route, but he's with a Premier League club. So he had that inner belief and that desire to think, well, yeah, I can do this and I can still do it. And he did. And it's got to come from the individual. And I mean, like people talk about, I've come back into recruitment and like, what do you go and you look for when you're watching a player? And I just look for like a player who he shows desire on the pitch. He runs around. He wants to be on the ball. Yeah, he makes mistakes, but he just gets up and he gets on with it. He can be a little bit naughty, but like he gets on with it at the end of the day. And I mean, again, apparently Federer, when he was a young player, would be throwing his racket around, and he had discipline problems. But like the young, and you've got to look beyond that. But that fire in the belly, that's what I look for really, and somebody who doesn't like to get beat. he either shows it outwardly, or when you talk to him, you know that inwardly he's hurting. But they've got to have that fire in the belly, really, and that desire to want to play, and that desire to say, well, I was poor on Saturday, or I was poor in that game, but you know, tomorrow's another day and another opportunity, and not dwell on it and go, right, how do I put that right? And I think as well, you know, looking back at the academies now, they've progressed, they have so many support mechanisms, you know, that yeah, I can see it, and it's good in some way, but like, again, it goes back to that individual. You've got to find out how to turn that round. You know, they can come and sit with me, and I can give them advice and say, well, you maybe should have looked at it that way. But ultimately, I mean, Kevin used to talk about this when you're playing in front of like 40,000, which he did, and I used to say to him, well, you play in front of 40,000, and you're playing against a lad in midfield who's giving you a really tough time, and he's ripping you a little bit, like, you know, and there's nowhere to hide. You know, what did you do? You know, that's got to come from the individual in that situation. He's got to find a way. Otherwise, if he doesn't, you know, the opponent's always going to win. And like, obviously, you've been in tennis. Well, I love tennis and I watch it, and I always like sit with my wife and go, you know, when you watch tennis or you watch football, you know, I always look on football as like, well, I might have a teammate who can help me get through this tough time, and like, you know, or you might go, look, I'll deal with that opponent. You mark this opponent. But when you're a tennis player, you're out there by yourself, and things aren't going right. Yeah, your coach is up in the stand, but it's not even like football. You can't go across and talk to the coach. You've got to work that out for yourself. And I think in some respects, in with the younger footballers, because of sometimes having that external support, it takes away the internal strength of saying, I need to work this out, I need to deal with this. And ultimately, I've watched games where you can see they're not going to do it, so ultimately they get taken off, they're subbed. But really, in essence, really, that's their get out of jail card. Whereas when I was taking teams, you could see that happening. I was of a mind to say, I'm not going to take him off because he's looking to be taken off. He's going to have to stay on, and he's going to have to find a way to deal with that. And then obviously I'd speak to them maybe one-to-one after a game, and maybe say it, and why do you think I left you on when you were struggling? You know, did you expect to be taken off? Well, yeah, I thought you would have subbed us. So it's those little things that I think in the younger player they've got to learn, because ultimately, if they're going to play at the highest level, they will find themselves in that situation at some point.
That's
and
a really
again,
good point, Jed. And especially when we're talking performance psychology and we're looking at how players adapt, as soon as they cross over the white lines, from Monday to Friday, your job is to prepare them for game day. And then on Saturday, for those 90 minutes, you know, they've got to, you're right, they've got to try to find a way, but they've got to have that mindset to be open, to be more creative and finding a different way. And I think sometimes some players just get stuck in, you know, that's what they do, that's their job, do no more, no less. And they come across an opponent who just is better than them on the day, and they've got a choice. They've got a choice to either just sit and accept it and take it and eventually be taken off, or try to find a different way to win their personal battle.
No, I totally agree. And I think, you know, obviously we're governed by Premier League rules and protocols, and, you know, there's a lot of talk about under 18s, under 23s, you know, is it fit for purpose? And, you know, I don't want to live in the past, but I think you've got to look back sometimes. And one of the things that, like, obviously when it wasn't 18s and 23s, it was like 17s, 19s and reserves. Me personally, I thought it was a better system for that reason alone, in the sense that we now have like first years coming in as first year scholars, but really some of them will probably not be playing a lot of football because there's only one team. there's only under 18s, and they've got to get into that under 18s. So, you know, they may not be playing every weekend. Whereas I always felt when it was 17s and 19s, you had two teams. So all the boys that were training every day played on a weekend. So that, like what you've alluded to, they had to cross that white line. So you had first years, I can remember, you know, 2 or 3 first years who, you know, play one Saturday and they were really poor, and then you're training all week. But, you know, they're not getting off the hook. They've got to, there's another game coming. I've got to step over that white line again. I've got to give it another go. Whereas in some respects now, a first year, he maybe he's playing in the under 18s, he wasn't very good. His mindset is, well, I probably won't play next weekend because, you know, probably an under 18 will play, or another under 17 will play. And I think we've lost that, in the sense of, like, I sort of look on it as like it should be their right to have a game on a Saturday. Like you've alluded to, they're working all week to then play football on a Saturday, but they haven't got that avenue really. It's like I'm working all week, but I don't get a game of football on a Saturday because there's only one team. And I you know, I question, you know, the fact that there is only under 18s, and I just felt it drove players, in the sense of, like, your first years wanted to prove that they were good enough to go and play in the 19s. The 19s were working hard to get into the reserves, which was basically the B team, really, the next team to the first team. And equally, when they went into that reserves, they were playing against, you know, older players who'd maybe been around the block, coming towards retirement, or either having to deal with that concept or learn from that concept. I mean, Elliot Dickman, who's still at the you know, he's down London taking the 23s. When he was a young player, he was playing with Kevin Ball on occasions in the reserves. He was playing with people like Paul Bracewell in the reserves, and they weren't, like, once he crossed that white line, he was one of them. He had to, you know, and he learned off them, but equally they were being demanding of him. And I think in some respects we've lost that, really, which again builds that resilience and that mental toughness of, like, come on, you have to deal with me, or you have to deal with this situation. And I think, you know, the academy's present structure's been running for probably about 11 years now. I think it needs to be looked at. It needs to be, in my opinion, reviewed. And, you know, it's the best time for a long time, the amount of young players that, you know, are sort of on the big stage at the moment. And there's a lot of really good young players coming through, and will be around the England squad. But I think it still warrants a review, and certainly I certainly think that if a boy's training all week, he does need a game on a Saturday. It's like me having a son who's an apprentice bricklayer, and he works all week, but he never gets a chance to build a wall. You know, it's like I just look at it in that respect. So there's a lot of things floating around at the moment, and you know, some of it obviously needs to be discussed further for me.
I think there's something you get from match play that you can't get from practice. You know, there's a little bit more mental toughness. There's a sharpness. There's a little bit more, you know, physical prowess that you can only get from a match. And there's only so much learning you can get in training as well. Until that midfield player skins you and gives you a hiding for 90 minutes, you're not going to learn that anywhere else apart from on the job. And in other industries do a lot of on the job training because it's so much more beneficial. So if you don't get that game time, it is going to be tough to learn and go to the next level.
And I mean, I've looked at different models. I mean, years ago, obviously the Germans were good at the fact that, you know, like, they had a player who played at the club and he's coming towards the end of his career. Could be 2 of them. They were around what they called the B team, and they they were playing with the younger players who had potential to go to the first team, and they were like mentors with, you know, on the pitch, within that dressing room, and I felt there was a lot to be said for that. I mean, I remember when Roy Keane was manager, he had Graham Kavanagh, who he brought to the club, and I think Roy had a chat with Graham about that scenario, and Graham played in the B team, or the under-21s at the time, and I remember it because he had the Hendersons were playing, the Colbacks were playing, the Hourahans. He had them. You know, it was a really good potential dressing room, but Roy had put him in there for that reason. You know, to like keep them grounded, you know, kick them up the backside in training, and then equally, you know, deliver his experience in game situations, and you know, at half time, you know, things are going great, don't get too cocky, things are not going so well, you know, not just the coach saying it, but like a player who'd been around the block and being a good player sort of saying, come on, we need to step up, you know, and I think that's been lost to a degree because the age ratio tends to be like all the same age, you know, and in some respects, some lads are frightened to challenge other lads because, you know, they're around them a lot, where somebody who's done it, got the badge for doing it, he doesn't care really. He's going to say what he has to say to get a response. So there's been a lot of pluses, but equally, I think we've lost things as well, you know, which I personally think would help players, because we've got to remember there's a lot of young players in the system, and they're not all going to play Premier League football. So the question is, are we really preparing them for other levels of football? And obviously, when I left Sunderland and had some time out, spent time with the family, you know, I had an opportunity to go into Hartlepool and you know, the National League, which was like, wow, that was like, you know, what you would really definitely term real football. There was no prisoners taken. And I couldn't help but sort of stand back and think, you know, could some of the lads at Sunderland who were playing in the 20s presently deal with this situation or deal with these situations? And lots of times, unfortunately, I was like thinking, no, I'm not sure they could, you know. So we've got to also be mindful that, you know, some of them want to stay in football, but they will play at another level from the Premier League, and it is a different game. There's no getting away from it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I remember touching base with you when you went to Hartlepool, because I spent a year and a half under Ronnie Moore there for a time before Craig Hignett came in, and a great little club. And again, it's a club that's suffering still and needs to come out, which is very similar to Sunderland. We need to come out of this suffering period and push on a little bit. I'm interested in terms of the culture that you created at the academy, and either the connection or the disconnection between the academy and the first team. And I hear loads of people over the last 10 years, and I'll hold my hands up and say I've always been a Sunderland fan, and my dad's a Sunderland fan, my granddad's a Sunderland fan. But I hear loads of people complaining about the culture at the club and about the fact that, you know, there's something rotten behind the scenes and all this negativity. And I haven't been able to put my finger on it in terms of a professional point of view, and knowing some people in the club and knowing yourself and things like that. Because the number of managers that have changed, the number of players that have changed, the number of owners that have changed, then where is the horribleness that sits in the club when everybody else is gone and there's been new people coming in? I don't understand where we've managed to get it so wrong over the last decade. Any thoughts on your side?
I think when there is a sort of continuous situation where, you know, managers are coming and managers are going, I don't think that helps the situation. And like, you know, you asked about how we develop a culture within the academy. Fortunately for me at the time, you know, I had some CEOs who firstly, you know, listened to us and took on board what I was trying trying to put across, in the sense of, like, you know, we developed our culture, our values within the academy. And my argument was always that, you know, we can't keep changing them every time a manager changes, or, you know, it just can't, it just causes confusion in the sense of, like, you know, where we're going as an academy. So fortunately, you know, we had managers come and go, but, like, you know, we steadfastly stuck to our beliefs, our values, our culture, and we tried to, you know, drip feed them upwardly, and basically they trusted us in respect of an academy and what we were doing. And there was managers came in and who did drip feed down things that they wanted implemented, certainly at the under 21 level, which was fair enough. But I just think when you get in that cycle of, like, employing and then dismissing and employing and dismissing, and it sort of erodes really what you're trying to do, and I think it creeps up on you, because a manager goes, and then it tends to be that coaching staff leave, recruitment staff leave, then they're going down a different path. Other new people come to the club. They don't really know the club. They don't know the passion of the fans to a degree, or the culture of the area. You know, we're a working class club. People, you know, work in the shipyards, work in the mines. On a Saturday, it was their release, and they'd go along, and they wanted to see a team that expressed the same values that they had: work hard, play hard, and I just think you get in that cycle of changing of managers, changing of staff at the top end, and it just creeps up where, I'm not saying it's deliberate, but all of a sudden there isn't a culture, there isn't values, because in essence, really, in respect to Sunderland, sometimes the managers haven't been there long enough to really drill down how they want to do it. So it just, I look on it as like a riverbank, and it's gradually crumbling, and it might be a little bit, and then it might be a big bit, but then there's a little bit and a little bit, and then all of a sudden you step back and you think, bloody hell, that riverbank's just disappeared. And I just tend to think that's what can happen in a football club. I'm a great believer in continuity. Yeah, people come and people come and go, but, like, you need a bedrock, really. So yeah, if a manager goes, does it mean that everybody has to go? I'm not so sure. People have to be judged on merit and the fact that he's a good person, he's a good coach, he does a good job. You know, like, why the fact that the club makes the decision that, you know, it's time for the manager to move on, or a head coach, but, you know, it doesn't mean that everybody else has to move on. And I remember going to Sporting Lisbon. I had to do a study for the Premier League. It was a SWOT analysis. And I remember going to Sporting Lisbon. I was there 4 days, and they had a situation where they had a problem. The first team wasn't particularly doing very well. The head coach was struggling. The assistant coach was there. But instead of, like, the head coach left, instead of the assistant coach also going with him, the under 18s coach went up to be the assistant coach, and the assistant coach, like, which he was agreeable to, he dropped down and wanted to get out of the first team, sort of set up to sort of clear his head for a better term. He went back down and worked with the under 18s, but ultimately stayed in the club. Mm-hmm. They didn't just, like, get rid of everybody. They felt that he was a good character. For whatever reason, things weren't working slightly, but, like, instead of just discarding them, they looked for another way of keeping them involved and keeping them around the club. And I just thought that was quite refreshing at the time, because obviously, you know yourself, in the Premier League, it's sort of like manager goes, everybody goes in most cases. And if that's happening and happening and happening, you're never going to have a structure that's going to be successful. And then it's that aspirations, it's that being realistic. You know, we were in the Premier League and doing well, but you know, were the aspirations too high? Should we have been looking at, like, let's consolidate and build strong foundations and then go from there? But sometimes, you know, everybody wants to go in a hurry, and sometimes you haven't got the capabilities to do that, really.
You mentioned three words. You mentioned three words there, which I think have to be the bedrock of every organisation, not just football club. One is culture. So, you know, you've got to get the culture right, you know, across the board. Two, within the culture is the values that you mentioned. You need to have really strong core values. And I've worked with a few police forces, and, you know, every time a new police constable comes in, they change the values. And therefore, all of a sudden, they just become 6 words on a wall, and they don't really mean anything. You've got to keep your core values. And the third word which you use, which I also love, which sits underneath that, I think, is character. You have to have the right characters in the organization. And do you think we're close to getting that back? And, you know, we've just obviously had another change in the club.
There's a new regime coming in, and it's like, you know, the head coach, or, you know, the sporting director, they need to drive that. And I'm a great believer of, like, what you've said there, is that, you know, values can't just be words that you write on a wall, or, you know, you send around in an email. Values and culture, you've got to live that, you know. And I always look back on the academy, and, like, you know, we instill values in the lads, but I expected that from the staff as well. And, like, you know, an example would be that you know, one of our values was that when we went away from home, we wanted to leave the changing room how we found it. So after a game, we used to clean the changing room, and the staff would sweep it. The lads would pick up all the tapes and what have you, and we try to leave the dressing room as clean as possible. But we had to do that. We all did that, you know. And I mean, we nicked it a little bit from the All Blacks. They were keen on that. And, like, you know, it's like, you've got to live them values. And, like, it's like the bibs had to be hung up, the balls had to be washed. We just instilled values, but it wasn't just like a few people doing it or putting signs up around. You had to do it. You had to. That was the way we did it. If, like, at the younger ages, if I can remember, you know, we were sort of saying we don't want to hear too much bad language. If a player was continuously effing and jeffing, we just took them off. You know, we wanted the lads to know that, you know, they weren't allowed to do that. You know, we wanted open dialogue, but if a player was sort of like being quite aggressive or abusive to a coach, then it was like, no, he has to come off, because that we don't do that at Sunderland Academy. So it was about not just words, but about really pushing it and living it, and, you know, making sure we can't do it now because of the situation, but, like, you know, that when you came to the academy and you bumped into the lads all came and shook your hand.
Yeah.
And that was something that, you know, we wanted to break barriers down between players and coaches, and have, we had parameters, but we had a freedom within that. And if they stepped out of the parameters, they had an opportunity to step back in and have a freedom there. You know, we wanted them to make decisions and challenge each other, challenge the coaches. I mean, I can remember I was talking to someone the other day about, and it was again Kevin Ball. I was in my office and Kevin had been our coach, and he came up and went, "Oh, you've got to have a word with that George Honeyman. He's doing me head in." He says he's just been giving it to me about the system I played in the last game. So basically, when I got into it, George had sort of spoke to Bally and sort of said, Kevin, that system you're playing on a Saturday is not working. This system would be better with the players that you've got. And like I was saying to Kevin, bloody hell, Bally, that's so refreshing, isn't it? That like George has got the strength, the character to confront you and want to discuss football with you at like the age of like 17 or 18. I'm really surprised that George went on to captain Sunderland like Bally did. So, you know, and that's, you know, that's built up over a number of years, and that's what we try to do. And ultimately we want those players to keep progressing till they get around that first team. And my ultimate aim was to get a lot of those players around the first team to then influence the culture within the first team. And in all honesty, you know, it in some respects, when Sunderland's in a Premier League team, it's probably a little bit pie in the sky, really. But that was the ultimate aim, really.
Yeah, I remember being in the academy and having a conversation with Duncan Watmore about that, the walk across the car park to play with the first team guys, and what was going through his head at the moment as well. But
yeah.
I'm just conscious of time, Jed, and thank you very much for jumping on and having a chit chat. If with the new guys coming on board now at the club, if you could wave a magic wand and working on those three things in terms of the culture, in terms of the values, and also looking at the character, in each one of those three categories, what would be your number one priority to work on in order to get Sunderland Football Club back to where you rightly said it belongs in the Premier League? And I know that's going to take time, and the magic wand doesn't mean it's going to be next season or the season afterwards, but what should we be working towards in terms of an improvement plan?
I think ultimately, you know, the new coach is going to need time. It's not a magic wand. He needs time to sort of assess his squad and look at his squad. But then within the game plan, you know, simple values of like, and it sort of links into what the fans are looking at. You know, once you cross that white line in a red and white shirt, you know, to work hard and to try to get the ball back should be a gimme. And like, I think, you know, if players buy into that, you know, they'll get the support of the fans, because that's what the fans want. That's what they pay the money for. They want to see players who, hey, we're human beings, footballers. I used to say it to some fans. Remember, he's made the same as you're made. What you're made of, he's made of. And you make mistakes, he will make mistakes. But it's just seeing that, you know, they want to work hard, they try hard, they give everything they've got. And that's got to be a gimme, really, for players who are going to be around that first team, really. So that you know, that would be a number one for me. And then around the players, you know, realizing that you know, we are in Division 1 and there's no getting away from that, but it is a Premier League setup. You know, the training ground's fantastic. And again, appreciate the facility, appreciate the pitches that they're training on, and respect it, look after it, and like, you know, treasure the fact that it matters to you, you know. And again, you know, I've come back to the academy, and one of the first things I noticed a little bit, that it was a bit tired, it was a bit untidy, things weren't being put away, all those things. I think if people buy into that concept, all of a sudden it's, you know, you see a difference. I remember somebody telling us a story about Ryan Giggs and a £1 million plus player being signed, and he was in the gym, and I think he was leaving this out, leaving that out, and I think Ryan Giggs had a word with him and said, "Hey, you're at Man United now. We don't do that. You know, we put things away. We don't leave towels lying around. We don't leave our training kit for somebody else to pick up." You know, and I thought that was like very refreshing, and basically buy into doing the little things very well, and all of a sudden big things start to happen. That was always something that we spoke about. Don't always think about changing massively big things. Just keep chipping away at the little things and making sure the little things are done well. Then all of a sudden, the big things start happening. And we were a great believer in that. And I know, like Kevin, you know, I mean, me and Kevin were closely together. We argued a lot. We disagreed a lot, but like I always knew that mattered to Kevin. He wanted the little things done well. And like, if you talk to some of the lads who worked under him, you know, they always talk about the values that were instilled in them and the culture that they were exposed to. And I think regardless of, I just think it starts to develop, and all of a sudden it's not like a group of individuals. It's like we're a team, and we're Sunderland, and we're proud to be Sunderland, and this is what we do at Sunderland. And I think that's massive when you get a group of people, or I don't know, a small industry or whatever, where everybody's buying into it and everybody's moving forward. You know, all of a sudden it starts to snowball. You know, I used to say to Kevin, how are we competing against Chelsea and Man United? I used to say, how's your team just beat Man United or beat Chelsea or beat Man City? And like with the setup that we have, or with the lads. And at one point we only had maybe one or two lads that come from a distance. So all the lads were in a radius of like 30 miles. And like, you know, we're competing with the best. So it does work. It does certainly work. But you know, you need somebody to lead it and get the buy-in. And like, you know yourself, you've spoke to a lot of industries and you go into a lot of sports. It's the same. It's the same. And then having people that, I was fortunate, and when I was academy manager, that I had Kevin Ball and I had Elliot, and over the years other people who would challenge me. You know, I was the academy manager and looking for leadership, but equally they would challenge me and go, no, I'm not sure about that. And I think you need that as well, because you're not an island. You need to have a good support mechanism around you, and that mechanism needs to be open, and you know, you need to be challenged as the leader as well, really. And ultimately, when you are in that position, you've got to realise that you can't do it on your own. You need a good support mechanism around you, and you need people that you can lean on. And ultimately, you've got to realise, and you know, at times it took me a while, but you haven't always got the answers, and then that's when you need, you know, people like yourself. You know, I could be coming to you and saying, I'm having a problem with this. Externally or internally, you need people that you can go to go, look, I'm struggling with this, or I'm not particularly good at this, or I can't get this concept. I need help. So being big enough to say, look, I need help, I need support when required, really.
Brilliant, Jed. Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. I can't wait until we're out of COVID-19 and come have a proper coffee at the academy with you.
Yeah, that'll be great. I appreciate it. I've enjoyed the crack. You, like, once you get us on me pedestal, I can't stop talking, really, but it is what it is.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jed.